I'm Deborah Ondercheck, and just a little bit of my background before I start the presentation. Um, I am a retired educator. I taught first through fifth grade for 37 years, which was why I felt comfortable doing gardening with children. Um, I might be more of an expert on children than I am on gardening, but I thought I'd put together just a few ideas to make gardening a success with children, if that's your passion. The benefits of gardening with children. It brings a deeper understanding and appreciation for nature and the outdoors. It provides outdoor physical activities for families together. It provides you opportunities for engaged learning in math and science beyond a classroom situation. And I have to confess, while I was putting this together, sometimes I was thinking about being with my niece and nephew and working with children individually. But a lot of the time, I was gearing it towards people who may want to work with groups of children and be uncomfortable with working with groups of children, and to encourage you to get involved in that, because it really can be a lot of fun and it's not that hard. And it builds within the children and yourself a sense of responsibility and pride in your accomplishments. Before I go any further, I'd like to go back and I'd like to, ahead of time, give credit. If you see a picture in here that has not got a credit to it, it was taken by my husband, and I just want to give him photography credit for this. Oops, let me back up here just one time. Gardening develops math and motor skills in young ones. It's a wonderful way to help to develop the fine motor skills. And right now I'm talking like maybe 1.5 to 6 or 7 years old, when it's so important for the little ones to work with those hands and get those fine motor skills going. If you use big seeds like peas or sunflowers that are easy for them to pick up at first when they're young, if you pour the seeds into a small cup to make it easier for them to get to, and then gradually work to the smaller seeds as their fine motor skills grow, you'll find they'll enjoy gardening with you. Mark out a space with string or by laying sticks on the ground to help the kids visualize how far apart your garden, your seeds are going to be planted. Work on vocabulary with the little ones, especially the younger ones, and talk about, well, what does far apart mean? What does close together mean? You're going to want to, with the older ones, you're going to use words like length and distance and width and depth. Those are all great vocabulary words for like 1 through 5th graders. Show the kids the instructions on the packet and help them to measure. And with the really small ones, you want to use non-standard units of measure. Things like the width, the length from the end of my finger to my knuckle. That's an inch. So if I stick my finger in the ground, that's an inch. You might have the kids count knuckles. On a child's smaller hands, the length from the tip of their finger to their knuckle might only be a 1/2 inch. So help them to gauge and use non-standard measures with the little ones. They're not going to understand what a 1/4 of an inch means, but they will understand I put it down to my knuckle. And count with the kids, especially with the young ones. This is a great opportunity for one-to-one correspondence and counting. I've put 1 seed in, I've put 2 seeds in. Oops, this one has 0 seeds in it. Get them to use that counting and one-to-one correspondence vocabulary. That is an essential math skill for 1.5 to 5 and 6-year-olds. As you're getting the kids to transplant the seeds, this is such a great opportunity for them to use those skills with their fingers that they're going to need for writing and holding pencils and things later. So as they're transplanting, or as you're showing them how to transplant the seeds, one of the important things, and I honestly didn't know this till I did Master Gardeners, is don't pick the transplants up by the stem, because it's so easy to crush that. And once you crush that, you've killed the seed. What you want to do is show them how to pick it up between their fingers, and if they have to pull on it, to pull by the leaves. And it's okay if they pull a leaf off, the leaf will grow back. But if they crush the stem, they've killed the plant. Show them how to dig with a trowel. I know it sounds like that should just be obvious, but it is not. I work at J.J. Harris Elementary with a group of 2nd through 5th graders, and I was just amazed that we were pulling weeds, and the kids were all, yes, they were pulling them, but they were only getting the leaves off the top of the plant. They weren't getting up any of the roots. So I had to go, and it was violets, and violets, if you don't get the root, they're just going to come back in 2 weeks. So I was showing one of the kids how to use the trowel. Well, the dirt flies everywhere, and I get a dirt shower down my shirt, the whole shebang. The look on the kid's face was just he was so horror stricken, but like, that's okay. We're learning, no problemo. But it is important to show the kids how to use the tools and not expect that they're going to know how to begin with. Let the kids water. Don't be afraid of spilling water. Choose an appropriate size container for your child, one your child can carry. I included this picture here because you can see a spray bottle is great for watering too. Again, you want to have something that's the child can carry. The kids that I work with use recycled detergent bottles that have spouts on them. We've got soda bottles going. We've got the spray bottles. One of the things that's really kind of cool is if you have another container, but that container is like a milk jug in it, the water is coming out too hard and it's going to damage the plants, is to poke holes in like a soda bottle and fill it from the top. The water runs all out the holes and makes like a sprinkler system so that the plants aren't getting crushed, but you still have a water gizmo they can use. Make sure that the kids are watering, that not overwatering, but not underwatering. I teach the kids, again, I'm back to knuckles. Knuckles work well for me. To stick their finger in between 1 and 2 knuckles down. And if the dirt still feels dry, they need to water more. If the dirt feels damp that deep down, then probably they've watered enough. And I also encourage them to, because our pots have holes in them, we're not doing indoor pots. Does water come out the bottom? That's one of the ways you know the water is flowing through. And to look and see. The teacher in me came out when I stuck these slides in on the importance of developing math skills and literacy skills. And let me back up a second. Yeah. Garden journaling is an exceptional way to get kids to start using vocabulary, to talking. And for again, I'm talking 1.5 to 5 and 6 range. You're just wanting them to get vocabulary, and you don't really care what it is. You want them to use their words. You want them to develop their sentence length. You want them to describe things to you. So you're in the garden. They have a journal. They have crayons or paints or whatever art medium you want to use. A journal can be a spiral bound notebook. It can be a couple of pages of construction paper and some plain white typing paper you staple together. You can decorate the cover however you want with yarn and buttons and crayons, or just write my journal on it and go for it, however complicated you would like to make it. But they can draw poems, they can write poems, they can draw and then describe what they've grown. You can draw a map of your garden. My 2nd through 5th graders are fixing to do this next week because we've been planting things and we're planting as we go. All of a sudden, we can't remember where we planted those pea seeds and they haven't come up yet. And so we need to go back and think, where did we plant this? In the garden I work with at J.J. Harris, I have 6 separate independent 6x8 raised beds, and I've got 2 to 3 kids per bed working together. So nobody planted anything in the same spot in their bed. So it's important now for the kids to go back and remember, we planted beans here. We can't dig our potato hill here. That's where we are, but it's a wonderful thing to do. You can press flowers and then actually include them in your journal. Help the kids to identify those flowers and then write about how they smelled or how they felt. You can always write an adventure about your garden. Did a bunny come to visit? Did you see a hole where a squirrel has been planting acorns and now he's lost his acorns? Did you find some eggs on milkweed? Did a butterfly lay some eggs? There's just, the possibilities are endless, and I'd encourage you to do that. Developing literacy skills by reading with your child in the garden. Again, I'm aimed at the 2 through 5 aged kids here, but I've read with upper elementary kids aloud, and they if you pick the right book, they really can get into it, enjoy it, and will ask repeatedly for, can we do the next chapter? What's going to happen next? The list of books that I put here, I took from the Georgia Agricultural Extension Office Sprouts program. But there's just a host of wonderful literature out there that you could use. Now I want to get into safety considerations, which are incredibly important if you're going to garden with children. Be knowledgeable about the plants in your office, in your garden. Many common plants can be toxic if they're eaten, or they can cause contact dermatitis, and you don't want that to happen with younger children. Be aware of what's in your potting soil. Read the label carefully and ask your local garden center for recommendations on the best soil they have to use with young children. Remember, little kids put their fingers in their mouths, and you may not stop that. Little kids eat dirt. I mean, I hate to admit it, but they do. You don't want anything that's got maybe like an herbicide in it. You don't want little kids eating herbicides. Bulbs and seeds can also be treated with chemicals. So be cautious when you're using them, aware of what's on them, and make the kids aware of what might be on them. And when you're thinking about little kids, they're prone to choking on small objects. I can't recommend using seeds with kids under the age of 3, simply because they're so prone to eating things and putting things in their mouths and choking. If you'd like more information on if you're questioning whether this plant is poisonous or not, the links that I provided there are a wealth of more information. Again, I already told you the story that goes with this slide, but using tools appropriately. If you're going to work, especially if you're going to work with a group of children, you need to establish procedures for using the tools. Rakes and shovels should be either propped up against the wall or laid down with what I call the pointy end down, so that no one gets injured if they're walking by. If they're walking from place to place with tools, have them hold it by the handle in front of them, not over their shoulders, where if they turn around suddenly, they're going to whack somebody with the end of their shovel or catch somebody in the eye with a rake. And demonstrate the use of the tools again, how to carry them, how to put them up, how to use them. In the picture here, you can see 2 of the kids I garden with, and you can see how they are using the child-size tools that we have. In the garden that I do, we also have adult-size tools, and the size of the tool depends on the size of the kid. These kids just happen to be using those tools. They're actually too small for them. I would prefer that these 2 girls had regular adult-sized tools because they're almost as tall as I am. But on the other hand, I have a couple of second graders, and they need to be using these tools because the adult tools are just too big for them to handle. Again, you're going to need to teach kids these 4 things, which is weeding, watering, harvesting, and mulching. Take time to show the kids which plants you want pulled. And if there's a lot of weeds, but there's a lot of plants there you don't want pulled, my suggestion is to take it one at a time. Pull all the weeds that look like this, and then we'll go back and pull the others. If you want to avoid having plants that you're trying to keep pulled. But don't get upset if an occasional plant that you're trying to keep gets pulled. It's okay. If you're hand watering, I talked about that a little bit already, but make sure you show the kids to water at the base of the plant, not to dump it. They'll want to water it from up high on top of the plant, where they'll break off the leaves or the water will sit and cause fungal diseases. When you're harvesting, it's important to show the kids how you want it harvested. If they're picking strawberries, we just want to get the berry, but if we're picking mustard greens, then we want to snip the leaves off, but we don't want to pull the whole plant up. So show them specifically what you want done. Mulching, one of the great ways to recycle and to get cheap mulch and to get the kids involved is to spread newspaper between the plants and then add a layer of mulch to it. The newspaper just adds an extra barrier to keep the weeds from coming through, and it all is going to decompose in the end. I felt it was important to say a few things about working with students in a group setting. I'd like to invite you, if any of you are interested in coming out to J.J. Harris and doing a presentation or just working with kids in the garden, I'd love to have you come, and I'm sure the teacher that I work with, Philip Smith, would. He always says we welcome any volunteers. But you do have lots of opportunities to volunteer in schools and community gardens and community churches and in civic organizations. And I by no means got all the civic organizations there. I just picked a few I knew worked with kids. But just a note, when you're working within an organization, be sure that you're aware of that organization's protocols for supervising the children. And I can't stress this enough. It's never a good idea to be alone with one child. You always want to have somebody with you. That's to protect you from accusations and to protect the child. When you're working with groups of children, organization is the key. If possible, let children take responsibility and ownership for a specific part of the garden. As I said, ours is broken up into 6 different raised beds, and 2 to 3 kids each take care of one bed. And let as much of the decision-making process as you can be the children's responsibility. When you're working with kids, and if you look down here in the bottom picture, you can see that we've got things organized in tubs. I can't stress enough that when you're doing a project with kids, the organization, how are you going to distribute the materials quickly so that A, you don't waste a lot of time, and B, you don't get a lot of discipline issues because the kids are bored. And have a signal for getting everyone's attention. When they're all scattered out all over the place, gardening in different parts of the garden, you're going to want not to have to scream. You're going to want something that'll get the kids' attention quickly and in a fun way. You might count down from 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You might blow a whistle. You might use a phrase, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. At the school I'm in, they have a phrase that every teacher uses. And I say 4 houses. The kids holler back at me, and yeah, they speak from a distance, 1 home. But when they say that, they've been working on and are taught that that's the signal that they need to stop what they're doing and look at me and wait for me to say something. And it just makes working with them so much easier because it keeps us from fussing at each other. It keeps us from they know what the expectation is, and they know what to do, and they do it, and it makes everything fun for everybody. And then how big will your garden be? Choose a site. Choosing your site will determine the types of plants you can have. Most vegetables and flowering plants will need 6 to 8 hours of sun. A soil test is always a good idea, and I put the link for a soil test from the extension office in. If it's a brand new garden and you're trying to design a garden for kids, remember they have short arms, and you don't want them walking in the beds because that compacts your soil. So think about maybe a 4-foot square and doing like a square row gardening, so that the kids can reach and get to the plants without trampling things. And then in the location of your garden, how are you going to get water to it? Is it within distance of where you can drag a hose to it? Are you going to have to carry the water by hand? Are you going to use a sprinkler? Are you going to install irrigation? What is your plan for watering? My mistake at the school I taught to was we thought it was a great idea to plant a pollinator garden by the edge to our new nature trail that went out to the woods and down by the river. Well, it was, except for the fact that we planted it in the late spring. Who was going to water in the summer? And we had to carry the water down to it. Long story short, our plants died and we had to start over again because we hadn't made a plan for watering. So what is your plan for watering is a really important one to think about. Do you have specific learning objectives? Now, if you're doing this with your niece or nephew, maybe not. But if you're working as I was at a school garden, I always want to tie my things into some kind of specific objectives. It may be a pollinator garden because I want to talk about insects and bees and give the kids a chance to look at that. It may be a vegetable garden because we want to look at raising and growing food and being involved in our community and donating that food to needy people through a food bank. Just what is your objective as you're planting the garden, if you care to have one? And then for me, it's always important, what is your budget? How much do you want to spend on this? That may not be a consideration if it's you and your child, but for me in a school garden, it's always a consideration. What will you plant? Again, are the plants going to be safe? A lot of the ones that you'll see recommended, especially in pollinator gardens, may cause contact dermatitis. Rue is a larval butterfly plant. Carolina jessamine is a beautiful native vine that grows in the spring. Mine's blooming right now. Both of those can cause contact dermatitis. And foxglove, as pretty as it is in our garden, and it's recommended, and you'll see it in heritage gardens, is poisonous. You don't want to be ingesting it. It contains digitalis. What do we plant? That's always important. I listed these particular plants here based on the height that they would grow and the speed in which they would germinate. So the time it's going to take them to go. And I tried to pick ones that would do that quickly and stay relatively short so that the kids can have their interest peaked quickly. And so that when it comes time to harvest, they can pick the fruit or themselves. I use this at school a lot because when we're planting, simply because with the number of children I have, and it's just me and Philip, that we may not be able to do a hands-on when the kids need it. So I try to make them as independent as I can. So I have them make, before we even go in the garden, a seed planting kit, which takes a couple of popsicle sticks, a pencils, a ruler, and a Ziploc bag. And all I do is, and I do this with like 1st through 5th grade kids, is have them look at the ruler, and we talk about the fractional divisions on the 1st inch. And then we copy those onto the 1st inch of our popsicle stick. Then when we look at the back of the packet of our seeds and it says plant this to a 1/2 inch depth, the kids can stick their kids down to the 1/2 inch mark they made on their popsicle stick, drag it through the dirt, And that gives them a 1/2 inch row that they can then drop their seeds in without a lot of fuss muss, and they can do it independently without me having to go over and show everyone how to read the ruler and do it. Whoops. I'm sorry, I just did that wrong. This I just put up to give us an idea of all the different kinds of gardenings you can have. Yes, you can plant one in the ground. You can also do a raised bed. I love this recycled palette with the terracotta pots to create a herb garden. And then here we have a little mini flower garden that's out of recycled bottles that just is perfect if you have a small space, but you want to involve your children in planting and watering and watching it bloom. The next thing I did was talk about some different kinds of gardens when you might want to plant. I talked about having a learning objective. Well, some of these different ideas for themes in your garden just give you opportunities, different types of opportunities for using different vocabulary and different learning to happen. Pollinator gardens are a wonderful way to introduce children to life cycles and the interdependence of insects and plants. When you're choosing the plants for your garden, don't forget to include larval food sources as well as the ones that bloom. And don't forget to make it a 3-season garden, not a 1-season garden. With pollinator gardens, it's really easy to get the late summer, early fall with the goldenrod and the echinacea and the sunflowers. But don't forget the early spring too, and then don't forget the late fall and into the winter. Again, any of the sites that you see listed on the bottom are for further information. I believe that Laura's going to make a handout to pass out later that'll have those links on them. So here, I just made lists of things to give you an idea of what might be blooming in the spring, what might be blooming in the fall, in the summer, and then what would be blooming in the fall, in the summer, late summer, and then into the fall. One of the things I forgot to include, but I may need to mention at this point, is that a lot of our native bees are ground nesting bees. And when we're planting for them in our garden, we may also want to plan a bare space for them so that they do have access to places where they can dig and nest for the winter. That's also important in a pollinator garden. These are different plants that you can use, and by no means all of them. Okay, but some common ones that you can use in your garden that provide for the larval stages of butterflies. If you'd like any further information, Doug Tallamy's Bringing Nature Home is a wealth of information on planting a pollinator garden using native plants that you can go to. The last thing you're going to want to put in a pollinator garden is a butterfly puddling station. Butterflies need to sip mineralized water. They sip it from the sand or the gravel there, and they need the minerals that absorb in the water. So having a station like this, which can be as easy as a terracotta pot with some flat stones for them to make landing easy. They're like landing pads, and then spots for them to sip is also something you may want to include. Sensory gardens are also a different kind of garden you might plant. but one that you might want to include, especially to help the younger ones with their vocabulary development. They give children a chance to explore different textures, sights, sounds, and smells. Their design can be large or small. You can do 1 sense or 5 senses. Some points to consider if you want to do a sensory garden or include a sensory garden in as a part of your larger garden. They're a space for exploration. Vine-covered tunnels that you might make like a teepee trellis would be wonderful for the kids. If your garden has paths, you might want to consider making them out of different mediums, like part gravel, part sand, part pine bark mulch. So when the kids are running over them or they bend down to touch them, they get a different feel, and you can talk about how those things feel. Tree stumps as seats add texture, and they add a sense of adventure. Kids love to jump from stump to stump. It's really, you got more of those motor skill development going on there. But make safety a prime consideration. When you're choosing your plants, again, make sure you get the non-allergenic, non-toxic ones, and that the plants don't have, and that you're not using a lot of pesticides in the places where you want the kids to touch and play. Thorny plants like roses, you may want to put those in the back of the bed so the kids can maybe smell, but then they're not going to reach and grab. Oops. And then the sense of sight. The picture on the side there just gives you an example of what it might look like. One that has lots of bright flowers in it so you can talk about colors. Again, you might want to have it where if it was annuals, some you planted in the early spring, then you might want to change it out, later in the season, and put some, like in the fall, where you've got all the beautiful yellow and purple pansies to go in there to talk about different colors. And these are some plant suggestions for the sense of touch. Lamb's ear and yarrow are both really soft to touch. And yarrow has a feathery feel to it, whereas yarrow, I'm sorry, I said that backwards. Lamb's ear has a soft, fuzzy feel to it, whereas yarrow has a feathery feel to it. Coneflower, the seed pods especially, can have a little prickly touch to it that won't hurt. Borage and Irish moss, again, are that really soft textured feeling. And coxcomb, the point on the blooms is really kind of cool to touch. Here's some suggestions for sense of smell. I'm sorry, I did a little time check there. Sense of smell. Herbs are awesome. Any of the herbs, the mints, the thymes, the marjoram, those are all really good. But sweet shrub and lilac and witch hazel, those are all shrubs that have wonderful smells throughout the air. And then your phlox, and then hyacinth bulbs. And I don't often think of the bulbs as having a smell, but hyacinths do have a wonderful, wonderful smell in the early spring. And then a sense of taste. We all know we can eat the vegetables. So the plants that I included here were some flowers that are actually edible that we don't think about eating a lot, but that do have either a sweet taste to them, or a oniony taste to them, or a peppery taste to them, to give the kids a different sensation, different taste, and a different, I've never tasted anything like that before experience. And how would they describe it? And then I don't think about plants as having a sound, but you can include some for the sense of hearing. Balloon flowers, when they bud, if you squeeze the buds, they make a cool popping sound. Switchgrass makes a swishing sound when it's blowing in the breeze. And Baptista, false indigo, makes a rattle when you shake the seed pods. So all of those are really cool. This link down at the bottom had just a wealth of information on creating sensory gardens that you might want to take a look at if this is something that interests you. The colonial kitchen gardens were also wonderful, especially for the older kids, 3 through 5, or middle school, high school even. If you want to take a look, if you want to give the kids a blast of the past, let's say, and take a look at how people raised food in the 16, 17, 18, early 1900s, then this is maybe a garden you might want to consider. Kitchen gardens were designed for efficiency. They differed according to the family size and needs. They were typically square or rectangular raised beds, and they were surrounded by tree saplings. And I'm going to show you a picture of that in a minute. They were planted close together to make optimal use of the land, because they didn't have the tools we have today. So all of this was hand dug or plowed, and that's not an easy task. Small vegetables were planted close to the house so they could be easily gathered. And the walkways, if they weren't dirt, were frequently made out of gravel or crushed seashells if they happened to be close to the coast. And this was really amazing to me, but frequently they were live fences, hedges planted around the gardens rather than using a picket fence, because picket fence was more expensive than the live hedge. But they did surround their gardens in both in an effort to keep wind damage down, but also to keep animals out. Again, an example, and you can see in this example how they're individual raised beds with the surrounding fence and the path that goes through. And these are some of the heirloom flowers that they would have used. They also planted a wide variety of plants that they used for medicinal purposes. Plants like horehound were used for asthma and coughs. Angelica plant was used for colds and bronchial problems, and they would brew these in the form of a tea. Winter savory was used as an antiseptic or for bee stings. Oregano, I love oregano. I love Italian food, but I never knew that it was used for headaches and toothaches. Who knew? Pot marigold and hyssop and lady's mantle were all different plants they planted and used medicinally. And then they had their heirloom vegetables. Now, the ones that you see planted here are ones that they brought from Europe. And you can see here, this is from, I believe this picture is from the garden at Mount Vernon, George Washington's garden at his at the national park that is his home. But you can see here how they would have made a trellis in the background, and here you see them making a lower trellis for this to the tomatoes, I believe those are, to branch out on, be held up by. These are plants that they later adapted. They were native to America. They found them here and they began to use them widely. This picture I included for two reasons. One, so that you can see how they bordered their fences. These are willow branches that they cut and wove together to make their fencing. And here you can see that's a seashell background. That is from a garden in Williamsburg, Virginia, one of their demonstration gardens there. They also planted a wide variety of crops for dyeing cloth, which I found very interesting. Here you can see what they would have used if they wanted yellows or greens or blues or browns or reds. And if that's a topic that interests you, you know, and you may want to plant some of these plants and give it a try. Moon gardens is a new concept to me until I actually helped plant one on the Greenway in Athens. The reason for that was they had installed some bat houses, but they weren't getting bats to come to their bat houses. So they thought, well, maybe if we planted a garden underneath to attract moths, then we would find bats in our bat houses. And so we planted moon gardens underneath those bat houses. They're right there by the big butterfly metal sculptures as you're walking the Greenway. But moon gardens are really cool. What a moon garden are gardens that are designed to be white and to be enjoyed at night. So they attract a lot of moths instead of a lot of butterflies. Again, I've listed for you a lot of different kinds of plants that you might want to consider in a moon garden that have light, white, bright. But I also discovered that bright oranges and bright purples are also really good in moon gardens. They add a fluorescent kind of pop to them. Again, I want to make note that I included early bloomers, mid-season bloomers, and then late bloomers, so that you have a 3-season garden. And you also want to be sure you put some fragrances in there. So here are some that would be great to add a beautiful smell to your night garden, which you would be enjoying by the light of the moon. Bog gardens are also really cool to do with kids. Again, you're going to want to have a minimum of 6 hours of sun. You're going to want it to be on a gentle slope so the water will run through and the roots will get aerated, that they're not just sitting all the time in the same water. You can create a little one. You could do a bog garden in a pot if you wanted to. You can do it in a 3 or 4 foot circle you dug out and lined. But however you do it, you're going to want to line it after you dig it to a depth of 12 to 18 inches. And you're going to want to vary the depth, because I didn't realize this, but different of the bog garden plants create little micro habitats. And some of them will grow better in lesser depths, and others are going to need the full 30 inches. So if you vary the depths in your garden, you'll get a wider variety of plants to be reproducing and thriving. You're going to want to fill your bed with 50% sphagnum moss and 50% sand, and make sure your sand doesn't contain lime. You can use local sand if you want, but again, no lime. And you're going to want to kind of pack it down to ensure a firm base for your plants to root in. Longwood Gardens here had a wonderful in-depth directions for how to create a bog garden if that is something that you're really interested in. These are some of the plants that you might want to put in a plant garden. The one thing that I need to say about this is when you're going for native plants, make sure that they're sourced from reputable nurseries that have sustainable practices, both collection and production. You don't want people who are going out in the woods and collecting without permission. And you don't want people who are going out in our national parks and collecting without permission. A totally different kind of garden. From a bog garden, it's exactly the opposite. It's a xeriscape garden. Now, bog gardens need lots of water. Xeriscapes gardens are specifically designed to conserve water. Your plant selection, your plant placement, the way you irrigate, and the way you mulch are 4 important concepts if you want to teach kids how to do this. The plants should be grouped together by similar watering needs. You're going to choose plants that are native or are drought tolerant to help communities to save water during periods of drought. You're going to want a drip irrigation is recommended for efficient water use. You don't want a sprinkler going and your water evaporating. You want it to go directly into the soil. And mulching helps to prevent the water from evaporating from your soil, and so you have to water less often. I've put, again, some resources down there. I do want to mention the top one because I have the privilege of working with Gary Wade, who is a professor emeritus retired from the University of Georgia, and a delight to work with. And I've learned most of what I know about gardening from him, probably. I'm sorry, that was my husband saying goodbye. The last thing, and one of the really fun things to do with kids, is to just go buggy. Get into bugs. They love bugs. All you need, you can do the nets and the magnifying glasses and some ID books. They're all useful, but really all you need is a sharp pair of eyes and enthusiasm on your part, and go in your garden and have a bug safari. For the little kids, again, you can do the counting skills. How many legs does your bug have? How many body parts does it have? Does it have wings? Does it have an antenna? Did the kids you're talking about know what an antenna is? Or are you going to have to, is that a new word for them? Where was it? How does it feed? Was it got a munching mouth eating the leaves, or does it have a proboscis and it's sucking it out? How's it getting its food? And what's its body like? Is it smooth and slimy like a worm, or does it have a hard shell like a beetle, or is it hairy like a moth's legs are? Again, when I'm working with kids, vocabulary development is one of the things I really try to stress and would encourage you in your gardening and working with kids. It's just a wonderful opportunity to develop their language skills. Here I just listed, earlier I had mentioned journaling, and this is another wonderful journaling activity you can do. They can draw bugs. They can describe what they see the bugs doing. They can talk about what the day in the life of their bug would be. You could also, I'm doing pencil paper journaling, but there, in this day and age, you can do blogs. You can do cameras and take pictures and post pictures into any kind of site you would like to create where your child has an opportunity to develop those skills, if that's your preference. Over to the side here, I have a picture of a bug hotel, and the link below gives you very specific directions. This one that I posted the picture of is a professional one, but if I was doing this, I would do it in a cut off both of the ends to a clear liter soda bottle, and then I would stuff it from one end to the other with what you see there, which is the sticks, the pine cones, and then the stalks that have the holes in them. Our native bees in particular love those stalks with the holes in them. That's where they're going to lay their eggs, and their larva is going to hatch. Another thing I love to do with kids is to make the safari hat that I described down below. All you need to do there is take a full sheet of newspaper, and you smush it down on their heads to create the crown, and then all the rest of the newspaper is still fluffing out around you, and take masking tape and wrap it around their heads so that that forms the crown of the hat. Then take and roll all the rest of the newspaper up to make a brim, and it looks like a farmer's hat. And then you can have the kids do whatever they want to it. They can add paper flowers, they could make pipe cleaner butterflies and glue or tape that on there. They can spatter paint it with a brush and tempera paint. There's a multitude of things they can do with it. It's cool, neat, easy way to recycle, create something fun, and for the kids to wear a hat they're excited about in the to give them some shade protection. Composting is also a really cool thing to tackle with kids. Here you can see that's Mr. Smith, and that is one of our students. And they are emptying the compost pile, meaning they have taken all the fresh stuff we just put on there because it hasn't really been recycled since last fall. The bottom here is a screen, and what they do is they take all the not decomposed material off the top temporarily. They empty, shake it through the screen so that all the organic new soil falls out. Then they pick that up and move it to a separate bin that's just identical bin that's to the side of that, and put all the matter that had not decomposed back on the top of it to allow that decompose. This is our recycling bin. Then that left us with a 4x4 bed about 2 feet high of nice new soil we can use in our gardens. There's lots of reasons for benefiting. It reduces the waste stream, it improves our soil health, and it provides all the nutrients that are getting depleted from reusing the soil over and over and again. And it teaches our children environmental stewardship. I just popped the thing on here about different kinds of composting bins if you're interested. There are holding units, which is what you just saw in the picture I had, which is low maintenance and good use for limited space. There's no turning required. It will be 6 months. It will be a while because it is going to take time. It's faster if you aerate it in a turning unit, and it has less odor problems. When you are composting, just remember, as a homeowner composter, you don't want to put any meats or dairy into your compost. That's going to A, make it stinky, and B, attract animals that you don't want. This is a recipe for edible compost. I'm going to be honest, I stole this from the Master Gardener office. It's one of the activities they had me do as I went out to different farmers markets and was representing the Ag Extension office. But it's really a neat way to do it and a fun way. You need cornflakes and broken pretzels and coconut flakes dyed green. To do that, you just put coconut and green food coloring in a baggie and shake it, and then pour it out on a piece of tin foil. I pop mine in the oven to toast it a little bit and dry it out, and make it dry and flaky like dry grass. Gummy worms, chocolate chips in a paper bag. You taught to the kids about that when you're really composting, you want to use 2 parts brown to 1 part green in your compost bin as you're layering it to get your mix correctly, so you'll have the amount of nitrogen and other nutrients you need in your compost. And you do need to aerate it, which is why we tell the kids to shake the bag once they get everything in. That's turning and aerating their compost, and then they eat it. The picture here, I cheated because I could not find a picture of this one. This one is actually edible dirt, but it shows you how the gummy worm and the coconut looks like the green grass, and how you can layer it in. This one actually is also a really cool way to show kids the different layers of the earth if you wanted to do that. And if you use like chocolate pudding and crushed Oreos and some graham crackers, and the coconut with the gummy worm, that's also a great way to show kids the different layers of the soil. It's a rainy day. What you gonna do? You can't garden? I've got your solution. Don't let the rain ruin your garden plans. Here's some ideas for gardening with kids, even if it's pouring outside. Mr. Smith and I swear we've been jinxed because it will be bright and sunny every day but Thursday, and it will pour down rain on Thursday. Why would I care about that? Because Thursday's our garden day, and I have plans for outdoor gardening, and we can't do them. So I have just come up with always have a backup rainy day plan. One of the things we did that goes directly with the composting is I made a compost bin for them. It's really, really, really easy to do. You need a Tupperware container. You're going to need a drill with a 1-inch bit. You're going to need some screen, but scraps will do. Some super glue, some scissors, then just newspaper. I cut a big piece of cardboard and fit it on the top. It fits right like a top, tightly as an insert. That keeps the light down if the kids open it up. A, it keeps the light down, and B, it gives us, it lets me gradually introduce the kids to the worms, and they're not all in it all at one time. A spray bottle filled with water, and then your dirt, leaves, and fruit vegetables. Again, no meat or dairy. I wish I could share with you what happened before this picture was taken. Yes, this young man really stepped up to the plate. That particular day, he was the only boy there, and it was time to hold worms. And I've got all these girls in the background squealing and screaming and no and jumping up and down. And Zico mans up and says, I'll do it. The first time I handed him the worm, he almost threw the worm in the air. But he got control of himself because I'm saying, no, Nico, you can't throw the worm. That'll hurt the worm. And really, it was so amazing to watch kids. Eventually, we got everybody to hold the worm, and now they bring me worms from the garden. It's so wonderful to see kids grow that way and to get an appreciation for their environment. But it does take having a sense of adventure and getting them to have a sense of adventure to be successful. If you're going to make a worm bin, I put this picture there specifically A, so you can see the look of terror in his eyes, and B, the holes are for aeration. The screen is so the worms can't get out. What I did was drill the 1-inch holes, and you can see I put 3 on each side. And then I super glued the screen on the inside of the bins. The super glue takes a while to set. And so in order to give it some support while the glue was setting, I taped it down. I never bothered to take the tape off. The tape is actually not necessary at this point. The glue is what's actually holding it. But the tape was my temporary measure to get it to hold while the glue was drying. After you get it all done, seriously, all you need to put in is a cup full of dirt, because earthworms need the dirt to act like their teeth to chop up and grind their food. If you don't have some dirt in there for them, they can't eat and they'll die, or they can't digest and they'll die. So it's important to do that in. And after that, newspaper works, they'll eat the newspaper, they'll eat leaves, they'll put any kind of vegetable matter you'll put in there. You might go through a week or so where it might be smelly, but then one day you'll open it up, and like we did, and you'll have all of this wonderful compost in there. At that point, you can take it out, redo your bins, start again. There are 2-tiered bins that you can do, and drill holes at the bottom, and you can get compost tea to come out in the second bin that's underneath the first one. I didn't want to get that complicated. This one survives the summer. It travels with people when it needs to. If we need to take it over the summer, we need to take it home over breaks because the building might be too hot, too cold. It travels very easily. And I've really enjoyed using this particular model. I made a bird feeder with the kids the other day, and I was reminded about some of the things that I had forgotten. I listed what I used, but you could use anything you wanted to. I did use a darning needle, and I used yarn. I used apples and cranberries and grapes and orange halves. I tied some pine cones in it. I put native berry stems. It's important that if you're going to use berry stems, that you use ones that are safe for the birds. And several of the plants that we have in our yard are not safe for the birds. So check it out before you put it in a feeder. And a suet mixture, and I needed plastic spoons for this. One of the things, again, I want to talk as a teacher about working with large groups of kids is to think your project out. The things I did before the kids got this project, I pre-threaded, I pre-cut and pre-threaded their yarn, because 20 kids all asking me to thread their needle for them was not going to work. So to avoid that whole scene, I pre-threaded the needles. I also went ahead and tied and I used plastic cups that I poked a hole in and threaded, and went ahead and tied those plastic cups onto the end of my bird feeder. I'm going to switch back to the picture. They didn't use the plastic cups on this one. They used the orange empty walnut shells or orange halves and put the suet in that. And that's another option. There's many, many, many ways you can do this. This is just the way that I chose to do it. You can see I also pre-made the suet for them. We could have made the suet another day as a rainy day project and then saved it until we were ready to make our bird feeders. And then this is the suet recipe that I used just for you. Most of the recipes called for me to melt the lard, mix everything into the melted lard, and then put it in my freezer. That wasn't very practical for the use that I needed to use it for, which was with the kids. So I found you don't have to melt the lard first recipe for you to use. This one, if you let the kids, and they love doing this, just get their hands in and goop it around. Once they've measured everything in, they love doing that. And it mixes everything up, and you don't have to worry about having an oven of hot lard dripping on somebody, of any dangers like that for the kids. This is another activity that I did for a rainy day, which was to dissect seeds. You don't need anything special to do this. What you see in that gentleman's hand is a set of plastic forceps, but you could use tweezers just as easily. what I did was I pre-soaked the lima beans or the popcorn kernels or whatever seeds you want to use. I wanted to use seeds like beans, which have, when you can break them into half and they have two cotyledons or they are dicotyledons. And then I wanted to use a variety of corn, which has one cotyledon that it uses for the food and is not going to be able to be broken in half. So it is one and it is a monocotyledon. I wanted to talk about flowering plants with the kids. I wanted to talk about what a vascular plant is. The kids and I have already talked about vascular plants. We did that with another rainy day activity I didn't include, which is the one where you stick the celery into food coloring and let it soak it up. And then you break it and actually you can pull the tubes out and the kids can see how the water is actually traveling up the tubes or the vascular structures and not absorbing in the surrounding structure, which is really cool for them to see. But I used paper towels, and you can see that my kids at school, we do use a garden journal for lots of different things. Here you can see in the picture there, we were under COVID protocol at this time, so you can see we're all spaced out. And we've all got what we're using there. And we have our snack there too. The cups you see had juice and snack in it. So we're snacking and we're dissecting and we're sketching what we see, our observations, into our journal. And then we're going to use some of our vocabulary to label our sketches. I used a dichotomous key with the kids to help them to understand that as we're sorting plants and looking at plants, and again, this is a 2nd through 5th grade group, that some plants make seeds and some plants don't make seeds. And that today we were looking at the plants that made seeds, but we were very specifically looking at the plants that make seeds by making flowers. And so in that respect, down at the bottom under that sunflower picture there, you see we added monocotyledon and dicotyledon and then put our 2 examples underneath that. And then we glued that in our journal so that we can use it all throughout the rest of the year. This was a rainy day activity at my house, actually. And that young lady is a friend, and she happened to be over and we were looking for something to do. And so we went out in my yard and picked flowers in the rain, yes. But then we brought them back in because we picked flowers real quickly, brought them back in, and we made a floral arrangement. But here you can see where I did a more formal version of that. Over here on this side, you can see over here on the side right here, you can see where I gave them, again, a diagram. And before we started to make our floral arrangement, we took one of the flowers, we looked at it, we talked about the petals, we talked about the stamen and the different parts of the flowers. We observed it with our magnifying glass, and then we found where that was on the diagram. And we did a little bit of sketching in our journal to use our vocabulary before we began to put our flowers together. This is a plastic cup, floral foam that I bought, and 1 block of foam did 20 kids just fine. I didn't do anything fancy. I pre-soaked it, I cut it, and then I smushed it in the glass so that it would stay. And then the berries and the ferns and the camellias I picked from my yard, and then I stopped in Ingles and bought 1 bouquet of flowers, and that was enough for I think there was 15 kids there that day. This is just showing you more pictures and giving you a few more directions. But we had a great time doing it. It was a great rainy day activity. We did this right before Valentine's Day, so it was also a take-home present for moms and dads. And there's the picture that I gave them to look and talk about the different parts of the flower and what they did. Another activity I love to do with the kids is to make gourd birdhouses. I buy mine from a farmer's market near Helen in North Georgia. But gourds are, I usually see gourds at most of the farmer's markets I go to. If you're going to do this, the first thing you have to do, and that's me at the sink, you have to soak your gourds for about 30 minutes to loosen the thin outer skin, and then you can just wash them off with a washcloth. It's not hard. That gets any dirt or mold and that thin skin off the outside. After you let your gourd dry, I paint it with a clear sealant. I use Mod Podge because it's water-based, it cleans up easily, and it's non-toxic. Then I drill a hole. You see the green arrow. I drill a 1-inch hole on the front, but then I drill a hole, and these are 1/4-inch holes, somewhere in the neck, and it really doesn't matter where. It just depends on the shape of the gourd, and this particular gourd had that crook neck, so I did it towards the base of the gourd. And then I put holes in the bottom, so when water gets in, it'll drain out. The bird's going to build its nest in there. The bottom won't rot out on it. When I get the gourd to that spot, oops, I take it and that's point. I do all that as pre-prep. Then I take it to school for the kids to paint. The one in the picture is one that I bought. That's not my original work, but the kids do a marvelous job of painting. Again, I use a non-toxic water latex-based paint, so it doesn't wash off in the rain. Another really fun activity that we did when we started in the fall, we planted, UGA is kind enough to give us start plants. So 6 weeks into it or so, our plants are big enough for us to harvest. We harvested a lot of mustard greens and a lot of onions and a lot of lettuce. I wish that cutie pie was mine, but that I stole this picture. Part of when you work with kids that I can't stress enough that I wish as I'm making this presentation is that I had taken more pictures of the kids as I was doing the activities. But it's really easy to get caught up in what you're doing with the kids and forget to do that. This recipe that you see is one that I developed after I did a survey of a lot of different kinds of soups to go. And I said mustard greens, but the one that we did mustard greens and collard greens together. This is the one I ended up using. An Instapot makes this an hour activity. Otherwise, it's going, if you're doing it at your home and you have time to really let it simmer and cook it the old-fashioned way, that's great. I had an hour from harvest to eat, and if you have an Instapot, that makes it possible. Leaf rubbings are another really wonderful activity to do. They can be easy, they can be harder. You can level this right on up to a high school activity if you wanted to. Again, I put some vocabulary there that I wanted to go over with the kids. And don't get me wrong, I'm introducing this to the kids in the gardening club in a fun way. It's not in a test at all. It's I simply want them to hear the vocabulary and to see if they can use it a little bit. As we were looking at the leaves and choosing what leaves we wanted to use, I did point out to them and have them kind of sort the pile of leaves I put in front of them according to the leaf venation. I wanted them to look at it and let's talk about the structure of leaves. Can you see how they're vascular? Can you see where the vascular tubes are? Can you see what kind of pattern they make? Were all questions I wanted the kids to have. And there you can see, again, I stole that picture, but that's very similar. When my kids did it, I did not think to use watercolors with it. But when I saw this, I thought watercolors added such a wonderful depth to their art that it would be worth mentioning. Propagating plants is another thing we do on a rainy day. We are fortunate enough to be able that we have a greenhouse, but this is also something that we've planted seeds and we've planted cuttings indoors in the classroom. So it's something that you can do. We started with mint and snake plant and pothos is what we did indoors. The mint I got from my yard, the snake plant I got from my house, and the succulents, I have succulents in my house, and to be honest with you, I took a few of the bottom little leaves off of several of my succulents to take in so that they could start the succulents from that leaf propagation, to show them how you can do it from a stem, how you can do it from a leaf if you have the right plant. And this is an activity that I plan to do with the kids in the upcoming weeks, and that is to make a fairy garden. I hope they're as excited about doing this as I am. They're a wonderful way to introduce kids to non-vascular plants and fungi. I've just been walking around my yard and finding patches of moss and picking up sticks that have lichen growing on them. And I've ordered for them a mushroom kit, but if it was the right season, I could collect those mushroom spores from mushrooms in my yard. Then we're just going to combine them in a small container and create a fairy garden. Here's an example of one where they use the rocks and the moss and small plants. And a fairy garden can be large or a fairy garden can be small. All right, where's my? There's fairy gardens usually have a little house for the fairy. I thought this was a really cool way to make houses out of popsicle sticks and milk cartons, which is cheap. And I'm always looking for cheap because supplies for 20 kids aren't easy to come by. Here's another where they made their fairy house in a dish with succulents. This is what we're going to make our pots out of. They're just little clay, the little 1 by 3 inch clay pots turned upside down, painted with watercolors. Newspaper pots are another really cheap, easy thing to do on a rainy day. All you do is take 10 cans, empty means they can actually be full cans, because all you're going to do is cut strips of paper to fit the width, the height of your can, roll the newspaper around. You're going to want to have about 1 to 2 inch left over on the bottom that you're going to mush up to make the bottom of your can, and then add potting soil and a plant or seeds, whichever, and water. It's cheap, it's easy, and you're good to go. Again, these are all ideas I stole from the Master Gardener office. Make seed tape. This is a wonderful way to teach kids how to use a ruler, as well as when they go to plant, making it very easy for them to plant seeds at an appropriate spacing. You can use newspaper, you can use tissue paper, you can use any kind of paper you want. You need a ruler, you'll need some white glue, and you'll need some seeds. And you just cut the strips the width and length you want. You look at the back of the package, have the kids talk about the directions with the kids, then show them how to measure that distance apart and to mark it on their paper. And from there, they make the marks on the paper, then they add the glue and drop the seeds, and then you let it dry. You can roll it up and put it away for storage. And then when it's the appropriate time of the year to plant these seeds, you just pull your seed tape out, you can roll it out in your garden, and it's ready to go. That's everything I had. Just in closing, let me say that the love for garden once sown is never lost. I love that by Gertrude Jekyll. It is true. Gardening with children is so rewarding. It lets you see the world through children's eyes, and it lets the children see the world in a totally different way, and it's inspiring. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you. And if anyone has any questions, I'm going to turn it back over now.
Thank you, Deb. That was super great. Can y'all hear me? I really enjoyed that, and it was super fun. And we want to thank all of y'all for coming to listen to our Green Thumb lecture this month. And you know, there's a little bit of wrap up information here, and I'm gonna, if you want to stop sharing your screen, Deb, I'm gonna put up a slide with a QR code on it that y'all can scan. If you want to get more information, you can do that with your phones right now. And then let me share, continue. Okay, it says I'm screen sharing. I don't know where I went. Well, same issue we had earlier. There we go. There it is. Okay, so there's your QR code. And if you already registered before the lecture, Laura will send out a post-class evaluation email that we would really love for y'all to fill out if you get a chance, because it really helps us a lot. And if you haven't already registered, you can send Laura an email. Her email address is lney, L-N-E-Y @uga.edu, and she can get you any information you might need. And also, the recording will be up on YouTube if you guys want to check anything out from the presentation. And we thank y'all so much for joining us. Also, she'll be sending out an email for next month's Green Thumb lecture for April. And Deb, thank you so much. That was super great. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you, everybody. I enjoyed it. Happy gardening.
Happy gardening.